Mm.
Okay, we just started. I see some people come in already. Welcome. Thank you for attending. If you're just getting in, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. This is an opportunity not only to learn about product lines and hear Cody Hughes' story, but it's also a chance for you to connect with each other. So put your website in there, your Etsy. This gives us an idea of who we're talking to today, and can help us sort of direct the conversation. Thank you for coming. As I mentioned, this is about product lines. So we're really lucky today to have Cody Hughes, who has a really well-developed brand, who I've been lucky enough to personally see develop over the years at NextFab. And he's going to be talking about, balancing creativity with that tough decision of what is profitable. So the basic format today is we're going to run through who Cody Hughes is. We're going to hear his story. We're going to transition into some questions I have for him, and then we're going to turn it over to you about the halfway mark. So if there are questions that pop up as we're talking, just put them in either the chat or the Q&A button. You'll find that at the bottom bar, and I'll keep an eye on that and save those for the second half of the webinar. Also should introduce myself. My name is Anna Solomon. I'm the sales manager at NextFab, the host of our Making to Selling series. For those of you who don't know, NextFab is a makerspace in the Philadelphia region. And we've been running these for Making to Selling webinars for about 2 years. And as I mentioned, Cody Hughes is a longtime member. How long have you been a member?
Since 2018, I think. May 2018.
Yeah, so for a while, and I think you're in your home shop today. Is that correct? Yeah, has a studio at our new North Philly location. So if you're in the neighborhood, stop by. He might be there. And you can see some of his work. And I see a few people popping their websites in. And also tell us where you're coming from. Are you from Philadelphia? Are you from the region? We'd love to know. I know Cody has also been regionally in the East Coast, but you're originally based in Brooklyn. So is that correct?
Yeah. I guess I can just jump right in and kind of start off my story.
We'll give it maybe 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Before
I won't start my story then.
Well, yeah, so just we'll give it a few more minutes to let some more people pop in, and then we'll launch right into it. But
East Coast is what I know.
Yeah.
There's a while there in the pandemic that was thinking about moving to New Mexico, and for the life of me, I like just couldn't wrap my head around not being around like the changing colors of fall, like deciduous trees. It was a hard one for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it's a whole different color palette out there.
The desert.
Yeah. Yes. No rain. Not rain like we've been getting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for coming, everyone. I will repeat myself for those of you who have just joined us. Again, please feel free to put your website, Etsy, in the chat. Thank you to those who already have. Today, we are going to be talking to Cody Hughes of Untitled Co. Locally based brand, has really wonderful product lines, a sustainability focus. And we're going to be covering the basics of product strategy, how you can leverage current versions of successful products to create others, and also understanding what the criteria is to actually expanding your product lines. How do you know if something is being successful and you should move forward with it? We're really lucky to hear Cody's story because he's, like he mentioned, been doing this for a long time. And format of today is we're going to hear from Cody for about half an hour, second half, we're going to reserve for your questions. So again, if there is something that sparks interest for you, you want to hear more about, applies to your business and you're struggling with something, be specific, ask a question about that. We're happy to dive into some of those deeper topics about your business. This is what this is here for. Also want to just shout out, we are running this webinar series through the end of the year, from making to selling. The next one's going to be on July 27th with Kai Van, who I see is on the call, talking about Kickstarter campaigns and crowdfunding. So please be on the lookout for that email invite in the future.
You guys have a calendar that shares the upcoming webinars?
Yes, if you go to our NextFab website, you'll see under our events page, you'll actually be able to see our monthly webinars through there.
Sweet.
Okay, and so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Cody Hughes. I just want to shout out that he is right now nominated for an Etsy Design Award. I'm going to put his link in the chat so you can take a look, and put his website in here as well. And with that, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on. I feel very honored to be talking about this, and it was a reminder that after all these years, I do know a thing or two. So yeah, thanks for having me. So my company is called Untitled Co. It started back in 2016. At the time I was in New York. I had graduated from art school with a fine arts degree. My studio practice at the time was like heavily involved with, I needed a studio, I needed machinery. I was doing a lot of metalworking, woodworking. It was definitely something that I needed access to a studio. College ended, trying to make work out of my apartment. So grappling with this struggle of wanting to pursue my art career with much more limited resources. So I got a job with a art handling company. I was working in this wood shop, and it was kind of like adjacent to my thought process as an artist, doing some art handling, building, and it kind of was like a deep dive into this economy that I really didn't think about. I think when you're in an academic environment, it's very like safe and you feel like you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. You can get zero sleep and just be in the studio all the time. And but in the real world, that stuff like isn't sustainable. And but yeah, so I'm working at this job. I'm trying to pursue my art career. I'm also simultaneously making things. I'm living in New York. I'm faced with the challenge of high rents. I'm on a budget. I need things for my living space. So I'm making things that I need. I'm making things for my friends that they need, my family, giving gifts of functional items that I've made. So during this whole process, I've kind of been thinking, pursue art, pursue sculpture. I have a degree, I need to go in this route. But I kind of was, I was not wanting to do furniture. I was like very against that. My girlfriend always, told me to, oh, why don't you like branch out and, you're doing these things already. And I was very resistant to it. So Untitled Co kind of happened because of her. My girlfriend, Allie, created the Instagram, the branding, all of the the fonts, the colorways, all of the stuff. She just like was working on this without me knowing, because she had faith in me, more faith than I had in myself. And she kind of like pitched it to me like, this is a thing, you're already doing it, why not pursue it? And so it kind of happened that way. I was working at this job. I was absorbing all of this waste material from the art economy that I was in. And I really wanted to put it to use. So I was making these things, and eventually I went to a craft market as like my initial step to see if the things that I was doing were viable. Did people like it? Were people responding to it? And immediately I kind of, it happened. It was like all of the urges that I wanted my art practice to fulfill, all that stuff happened with the products. So kind of happened by accident, stumbled into it, and kind of went from there. I'm also, I have a little thing here I'll share.
You go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is kind of what the brand looked like. These over here, this was like the first few, the like launch posts on our Instagram. Some of our products. Yeah, this is all like 2016. And at the time we were, as I said, I was using just whatever I had, what scraps from jobs, offcuts from different projects. So my initial product line was like totally all over the place. I had material, I would try something, I would make a couple things, I would bring it to a market, I would get some feedback, I would sell out. And then it was back to the drawing board, trying to find material, trying to make new things, tweaking things here and there. But in the beginning, it was all over the place. It was like way too much. I didn't have like the quantities I needed. It was fine at the time because I was really only doing craft markets, and I had a Etsy shop with a small number of things. But if you're making one of a kind items, once that thing sells, that's it. You got to make another one, you got to photograph it, you need to post it. So it was clear that I needed to like hone in, pare some things back, maybe edit some things down. And so my product line has sort of stayed the same in some areas. It's evolved in other areas. Jasper, this is one of the products that we offer. Jasper is the name of the board, the name of the line, but it's also a reference to Jasper Johns, who's a artist who's big in the 70s, really awesome work. And so these boards, the pattern that these boards made reminded me of his cross-hatching paintings. So I knew I wanted to use my knowledge of art history. I was still very like tied into the art world, so it was like front of my mind, and I thought it would be an interesting way to create like a unique brand experience, especially because my product segment, cutting boards, kitchen stuff, home decor, it's not really like a unique thing. There's tons and tons of people out there. There's huge companies doing this stuff. There's retired people doing it out of their garage, selling it for nothing. So like I knew that I had to be unique. So creating this like brand theme was really important for me, and tying it into the artist name was part of it. It also developed like more practically. So the things that I would get, for example, this board was, I was working at this art handling company. There's a job where they needed this like scaffolding in the gallery for an installation, and so we things that for OSHA purposes and for insurance purposes, it has to meet a certain like strength criteria. So the material is very specific. So I had all these offcuts of this really specific material, which you see here, and I wanted to do something with it. I wanted to use it. It was visually stunning, and an easy way to take small material and make it bigger is to make these end grain boards. So I kind of threw these things together, and it turns out it made for this really stunning visual design. And from there, I wanted to make more things. Like where else can I use this design? So there's the cutting boards here. This was like the very first knife holder that we made. So there's some magnets in here. They hold knives against the wall. So it was just a way to use up all of the material. My product line had to accommodate for that stuff. I didn't want to be tossing away the last couple inches of the boards. I wanted to figure out a way to utilize those last couple inches. So in my product development, there's like the aesthetic visual side of things, but then there's also like the manufacturing, the practicality side of buying material, wanting to get the most mileage out of material. And I think that's a really important part of my thinking, is like how to make your product line work as a whole. You know, what products can help other products, both like thematically, but also materiality. If you're offering, you know, 5 different wood varieties for one product, and then another 3 different wood varieties for another product, that's, you know, a lot of stock that you have to keep on hand, because there's so many different products with so many different variants. So slimming that down, kind of honing in on like a color palette, all of that stuff is like part of the thought process for me. This is another design, our Yayoi design, all of these polka dots. This is another like very early design. I was making these boards before the brand existed. It was a way for me to, in traditional woodworking, there's a lot of like patching over knots and imperfections in the wood. And that's like, you know, wanting to save the material, wanting to showcase the material, but also it's kind of this like obsessive compulsive wanting to like have that perfect thing always. And so hiding blemishes with other ways of utilizing craft was like very exciting for me. And the polka dots were a big part of that. You know, there's a big knot here. Usually knots in wood are surrounded by really beautiful character. A lot of people will like flip this over and use the other side because it doesn't have a knot, it doesn't have discoloration, it doesn't have the figuring, but showcasing that and highlighting that was something that I felt was important. This is more what our boards look like today. And expanding on the polka dot theme, there are other products that we have. The rolling pins have a small little polka dot design in there. The knife holders also have polka dots. So there's a way, it's a way to like thematically connect things. And also just to utilize more materials. So this photo I thought would be fun to include. This is my dog right here. But this is also a serving board of ours. This came off of the CNC router. And this piece right here is a little offcut. And so some people might toss that in the garbage. I save it and I get, you know, a couple polka dots that can then be put into a rolling pin blank. And I'm utilizing that material. Ideally, one day in my dream shop, I'm going to have a wood burning stove and I'm going to heat my shop with all of these little pieces. So the idea is that trees are just like such a remarkable thing in the world, and they just shouldn't be, every little bit of it should be used if possible. Yeah, and then I'll show my website here just to kind of tie it into what it looks like today. So a lot of the same stuff. The planters also were a big, the planters have been like the bread and butter product from the beginning. They were a way to utilize the tiniest pieces of wood in the shop, cut them on the bandsaw, put a little air plant in there, and it's like an easy decorative little green plant that you can have in your home, like very unique, but also like really great for utilizing material. Some stuff is newer. These are pretty new. The ring holders, the ring holders, I wanted to branch out into some different materials. So I'm using steel. These are powder coated steel. There's a little cork pad on the bottom there. These cones are offcuts from the rolling pins. So that's a way to like fit in that material in there. The trays are pretty new. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities. The serving boards, I kind of hammered down on 3 different shapes as opposed to cutting them by hand. So these are done using the CNC router. Yeah, more planters. The candlestick holders are sort of adjacent to the planters, kind of thematically that faceted look. The cake stand, so kind of expanding, but also honing in on something. Yeah. So
That's great.
Arc.
Yeah. I see, just you telling your story, there's sort of this push and pull. Sorry, this is I don't know if you can hear the street right now over my mic. I apologize. I see the push and pull sort of between your design concept, your art history background, and the desire for sustainability and seeing the material less as like a whole that is going to be cut down, but as a whole that's going to be used in each part. Is that a mentality that you had from the beginning when you were starting to make dozens and dozens of products and sell them and see what is successful? Was that something that helped drive your product strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the beginning, growing up, making do with what I had, just like that mentality of like saving things and being resourceful. I think that's always kind of been ingrained in me. a lot of the people who I've worked for over the years have been really inspiring in that regard, who like are really creative in the ways that they can reuse things or utilize different materials. And then, yeah, I think living in New York for 10 years, there's stuff out there that's ripe for the picking. I went to a lot of different people's workshops to collect material that they didn't want. So it was very clear that depending on the scale of your business, your waste is going to be different. So if you go to a cabinet shop, they're just cranking out kitchen cabinets, their waste is like dollar signs, because that's a couple dumpster loads that they have to spend to get that out of there. Other higher end furniture companies that are making 20 grand tables, like yeah, so it's all different, it's all relative to what you're doing. But I think it's like more of like a personal thing for me, of like wanting to save this material, wanting to like repurpose it in a new light. The Yayoi board with the polka dots, I always think that that's such a interesting like a little time capsule. It's like you look at it and it's this beautiful colorful thing, but like I look at it and I can see, oh, I got that piece of wood from the guy in Kensington who like we met for the first time in quarantine and he gave me all this stuff, and this over here was this thing that Mark from NextFab gave me and I'm still using it like 3 years later. And so I think there's something really powerful in that. I think that is also like a double-edged sword too. The planters, I think, are a good example. They started gluing multiple pieces of wood together, planing, joining and planing each side. It was very labor intensive, but I was strapped for cash and I wanted to make stuff, and I wanted to be producing things. But that wasn't, you can't make 1,000 of those things. So when you're thinking about making products, it has to make sense to scale up. And there are changes that you have to make when scaling up. So for example, I'm not dumpster diving anymore for wood scraps. I'm going straight to this, I'm going straight to a sawmill, and I'm working directly with a sawyer to see like, hey, what are your projects going out now? What kind of like offcuts are you producing? What kind of material do you have overstock on? Or what kind of logs are not meeting the grading criteria that you need? Like what things can match up with our product line that makes sense, so that it doesn't go into their facility heating furnace or whatever, trying to save that material.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see some questions coming in. I just have one more for you. And if people have questions, start putting them in the chat, Q&A. You talk about you have just this wealth of creative supply of wood in terms of shape and size and origin. How do you determine what is going to be successful? And after you launch something, how do you say, I think this is something I should continue to make? Is it part of the performance of selling? Is it part of your production process that's easy? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, all of those things. I think ultimately it has to be profitable. It has to make sense. But it also has to be true to that thematic, it has to fit under that umbrella of what you're going for with your brand. I don't really think, I think to be like a savvy business person, I think you have to be like really limber. You have to be objective. You have to be able to like look outside of your thought process, and know when something is working, and know the difference between why I really like this thing, I like making this thing, versus is it performing well? Do people like it? When people use it, is it being used in the way that you want, or is it functioning? It's like that sort of thing. And I think the only way to do that is just to get things out there, to be engaged in your customer, talking with people, seeing how people use stuff, and if it doesn't work, then something has to shift. If it's not meeting your bottom line, you have to be creative with the way that you're working.
Has that gotten easier to do over time, or is it still difficult?
Well, yeah, I mean, a part of me really loves just like geeking out on production. A lot of people who I talk to who say, like, oh, you're making products, like how sick of making this XYZ product are you? And I'm like, not really. I'm like on the third iteration of like how I'm producing it, and it's like almost there. I'm almost where it needs to be. I'm really close. So I'm always like um thinking about ways of improving the process. um yeah, and also with the sustainability aspect, it's a new challenge to remain true to what you're keeping the sustainability front right there. When you have more customers, when you're putting stuff into stores, selling things wholesale, your margins are razor thin. So like you have to ramp things up. It has to be sustainable. It can't be backbreaking. Like all of those things are all part of that, overall, is this working? How can it improve mindset?
How do you objectively quantify it for your business? Is it an element of having other people to talk to about it? Is there metrics that you see? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think recently I've been meeting with some friends who also have businesses, and checking out their studios, and uh, talking shop. And uh, the last couple of years with the pandemic has been like really rough, for me, for being stuck in my head. It's great to have a home studio, but there are times when like weeks on end, the only time I'm going out is when I'm walking my dog. I'm not like engaging with people. And so yeah, I think connecting with other people, um, people who are doing similar things, and just like sharing that knowledge, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, community is important.
Yeah.
I did see a question come in from Kai. Says your products are stunning. I agree.
Thank you.
Can you please share your pricing strategy and how you stay profitable and competitive?
Yeah, so I think kind of to touch on what I said earlier about everything working under that larger umbrella, uh, not everything is profitable. Some things are more profitable than others. Um, Also, depending on what your business strategy is, are you primarily selling direct to consumer? Are you wholesaling? Do you have a product line, or are you releasing, one of a kind pieces every 3 months? Like, what is your strategy? Um, So it all kind of depends. Part of my part of what I think, as far as the dollar signs go, is figuring out ways to get everything to fit together. Um, Something that I've been thinking about for the last couple of years and that I want to develop is incentivizing, like more of a line, within the line, products that mesh together, products that can be used together. That way you're incentivizing another sale. It's not like a one and done thing. um, but like the technical, nitty gritty of pricing, I think kind of depends on, um, what your practice is like, what your overhead is like, what your expenses are, um, and just having a really good sense of what that is, like how much money you have to have coming in each month, so that you're not late on rent. So it kind of depends, and things have to make sense. There are products that I have on the website that I also wholesale, so it's like it has to work. I have to make a profit when it's sold wholesale. It can't be so astronomically expensive for a direct to consumer sale. So it's like, one of those things where you have to thread the needle.
There's another question that Kai had is winning. Well, I guess you're nominated. You can win if you all go like this product on the page I shared. Has it helped you boost your sales significantly?
Yeah, those things are, it all depends. I have, so the brand started on Etsy. That was like where we launched. So we've had an Etsy shop for, I don't know, since 2016. And Etsy is always doing stuff like that. They're always reaching out for, include this thing as part of this gift guide, and we're doing, whatever. They're always figuring out creative ways to like get their users involved and get their sellers to promote stuff. So this is like just another thing. I mean, I guess it's kind of a big thing, but uh, yeah, we'll see. I mean, they announced the finalists just a few days ago. I was talking to Anna before the webinar that I checked the other day, and there was something like 400 views, or 400 favorites or likes on that listing that is up for the award. So does that translate to sales? Maybe. But I feel like it's too soon to tell right now. Hopefully.
Yeah, so go like his product. See if we can get you to be a winner.
Friends will like it too.
Do have time for more questions. So if you have questions about your specific business, products you're working on, challenges you've had, throw them in the chat. But I'm going to continue because I have many questions. So transitioning into more like practical steps. So number one, how would you define a product line? Is that something that's evolved, something you were thinking about immediately when starting? Or do you think about it differently now?
I think it evolves. Yeah, I think the more you work, and maybe this is like the artist in me, but I kind of feel like my journey as an artist is always like discovering things, and anyone who has a studio practice, they always say like, if you don't know, just do it. You got to go through the process to learn that thing. And I think that working is, it illuminates things that you can't just think about. You have to go through the process of doing it, testing it. And some things don't work, some things do work. And all of that is like part of the the development process. But like I said earlier, being limber, being flexible is also part of it too. Like uh, I think it was the holiday season for 2020. We had a cutting board on our site. Um, it was made up of like all of these different pieces. It was kind of like an end grain version of the polka dot board. It was like very, very colorful. But that design relied on getting all sorts of different material. So it was a hard thing to still call it a sustainable board, because the demand was high. And it was just like, I can't keep doing this. It's like too much work. I'm going to the lumber yard and just like purchasing wood outright. I don't want to be doing this. So it was on the chopping block. It was ready to go. I made my last batch of it. But holiday 2020, we were Etsy again reached out to us about including it as part of like a holiday gift guide. So it's like, what do you say? No to that? No, you say yes, because you know how to do that. You've done it before. And, one last hurrah. What can that hurt, and that was insane. That gift guide translated into like, I think 13 grand in sales. It was like insane how busy November and December were of that year. It was just like crazy. And then after that, I was like, I'm done. This is it. Because yeah, it didn't fit in the overall theme that I wanted. And I'm happy to not have it, because I think I'm just ready to move on to something else. And I think that that also just happens.
Yeah, you took the opportunity when you had it.
Yeah.
Um, does your I wanted you to talk a little bit more about like the concept behind your product lines. You sort of mentioned your art history background and being in art school. And is it the visuals that really connect those product lines in your brand?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think early on, the stuff that I'm making is not unique. There's plenty of people making all this stuff. So tying it in with my experience and knowledge of artwork and artists, yeah, it's a way to make it unique. And as the brand evolves, it's clear to see how one thing performs better than another, and then it's like, okay, well, how can I get creative if this board is doing well? Maybe I can use this pattern as a drawer face for a side table, because people respond to that. Or maybe it needs to have a different colorway, a different shape, or a different style. But yeah, I think the artists it has been a theme since the beginning, and it's becoming more and more of a challenge to like be creative on that front. But again, I think that stuff is like good to be challenged by that. And yeah, and it kind of keeps me tied back to my roots as an artist. And yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I think that answers your question.
Yeah, and you're talking about using similar visuals and creating new products. Do you ever spin those visuals into custom work? Does Untitled Co do custom work?
Yeah, totally. I'm actually talking with a customer right now who um, wants, riffing off of one of our designs. but yeah, that's the idea. I think everything that I make is designed and thought in a way that can like be flexible, can be utilized in different applications. You know, I I like to switch things up and do different things. I think taking custom orders when they do come is like a way to remain flexible and creative. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think having the ability to scale things up, to have a, you know, polka dot conference table on like a much larger scale, or some kind of furniture line that riffed off of some of the designs that are happening on a smaller scale, uh, yeah, are definitely out there in the realm of possibilities.
Thank you. Well, we just had another question come in. Um, Cody, I'm a visual artist and typically show in galleries. In the past couple of years, I started making work that's more commercially viable. Do you have advice for trying to keep one leg in both worlds, if it's possible, or from your experience with the art world, would you say it needs to be one or the other?
So
So making, it's been making work for galleries, making more commercial work now. Should she be focusing on one or the other? Or is it okay to balance the two?
um, yeah, I think that, so if you're doing that already, I would say continue to do that. And stuff like that, I think kind of can get clarity as you work through it. Like for me, I'm selling direct to consumer, but I'm also selling to stores. So I have these two things, and I'm creating product lines that can, you know, function both ways. Some of the products are meant more for the wholesale side of things, less for the direct to consumer side of things. So I think there's ways where you can shift your resources to accommodate that stuff. And also, it's like, is that the right thing to do right now? There was a time where we had a client who loved the planters. They had a store in Brooklyn. He was ordering like hundreds of planters at a time. Just like every 3 weeks, I get an email. Hey, can you send another 96 of these over? Hey, I'm running low on this. Can you send it? And it was like crazy. And so I was able to like streamline my process. I was focusing a lot of energy into that, trying new ways to make that work better. And that went really well for a year or so. And then it, you know, shifted. I don't know, maybe they got a new buyer, maybe they introduced some other product, things that are out of my control. It's not my shop. So like, you know, stuff happens, and that is no longer a thing anymore. So then it's like, okay, I can start investing my time and energy into something else to make something else work. So again, remaining flexible, being able to roll with the punches, really hammer down on the stuff that's working currently, and you know, being able to hop around with, you know, remain flexible with the time, because things are always changing. I mean, the pandemic has been a great example of that, where you know, everything got shut down, everyone's at home, and now all of a sudden there's this high demand for home goods, you know, desks, laptop risers, desk organization, all this stuff. So it's like, if you're able to remain limber and say, oh, I can kind of like, this thing is adjacent to my other product line, maybe I can do this and ride on this during this trend. So yeah, I think it kind of depends on what's happening, what's going on in life, and how you feel about it. But I definitely think, yeah, you could go both ways. You could put all your eggs in one basket and go one direction, but it kind of depends on what's happening.
That's very good advice. Yeah, I think it's one of the benefits of having a small team is that you're extremely flexible in, that you're the person who can pivot quickly and change your production.
Totally.
We have another question from Brandon. Cody, what art handling company did you work for? Also worked as an art handler in New York City for a while. Additionally, why were you not interested in furniture?
Yeah, I think at the time I was just I don't know, I was just so against doing something that I didn't study for, I guess was my thought process. I was really reluctant to, I don't know, consider furniture as something that was equal to art making. And yeah, I was just like trying to make that work. And uh, yeah, definitely not reluctant to it now. I think things have totally changed now. But yeah, and the art handling company I work for was Art Crating. They are like they are the art handling company in New York that, well, I guess I always say this, but all of the when someone doesn't have the insurance policy for a job, like a high risk art move job, they hire this company, Art Crating. Um, Very wild time to be in New York, be working for an art handling company. A lot of crazy stuff, a lot of like seeing some insane homes, seeing what people will do for art. Just a really wild time, really crazy job.
I can imagine. Um, I have one last question to wrap up. But we maybe have time for one more if anyone wants to throw in question, advice from Cody, a question about your business. Have time for one more. My question is, where do you continue to get inspiration from?
Yeah, the inspiration is, I hate to sound so trivial, but it's everywhere. I think I think a big inspiration for me is being yeah, it's such a tough one. Yeah, I think my ideal vision of life is just having a barn somewhere in the woods, um, filled with old machinery, like from the 1920s, machines that I can tinker back to life, that are perfectly restored and perfectly tuned up. Um, and that's a big inspiration for me, because that's just like I'm pushing towards that objective. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think I'm still I'm still looking at art. There's a lot of brands that I look at these days. Fort Standard is a big one for me. Um, Lostine, who's based out of Philadelphia. Um, yeah, kind of all over the place. I'm a real dork for trains. So like big industry, big heavy equipment is always just like fun to feel good about. Um, yeah, and then also just like being outside, being in nature, seeing the world, seeing how nature thrives and survives. Yeah, like all of those things.
I threw one of those in the chat so everyone could take a look at that. And I'll get the other ones from you so I can send it out in the follow-up email. See, one person raised their hand. Any last questions? You can put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A, and we can. Oh, I see one question here. What website building platform do you use?
Squarespace.
Squarespace.
Squarespace, I think, is okay for someone who's offering like a small group of products. They don't really have a robust integration with other apps. I would love to be on Shopify. I think Shopify just has more features, but the thought of switching website providers is just not something I want to hammer down on right now.
Yeah, not a battle to take on quite yet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to wrap up, do you have any last pieces of advice or podcasts, books that you recommend for somebody who's starting a product-based business?
I would say figure out ways to engage your customer. I think starting off small, going to craft shows and being face to face with customers was really valuable. Talking about products, testing products. Don't be afraid to reach out to your customers. There is a time where I would just email some of my customers just to get feedback, and like that is totally on the table. Definitely don't feel like you're overstepping your boundaries or anything like that. If you're making products, you have to know that those things are working. And the only way to do that is to get feedback.
I think we had one last question come in, which we'll slide in here. I'm not a skilled artisan, but more conceptual design person. How do you form partnerships with artisans to make products like furniture?
Yeah, I think that definitely rely on your community, the people who are around you. Everybody knows something, and chances are someone has been in the same scenario that you are in now. Always just ask people what their thoughts are, what their suggestions are. I'm always asking people whenever I'm designing a new product. If part of it is outsourced, I'm always asking, hey, have you ever used a production wood turner? Who do you recommend? Who's good? Who's local? I got these parts powder coated from these guys, but they're not really the quality that I need. Do you have any suggestions? Just like kind of relying on your community. NextFab is a huge one. There's so many people at NextFab who are, laser focused on one thing. So there's, bound to be someone there who knows of someone who can help or is adjacent to that.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out to our staff there too. Many of them are makers themselves, and so they get so many inquiries from people, and also know where to find material, where to find other makers that we don't have capabilities of. So yeah, the NextFab staff are also really knowledgeable in that. Okay, well, thank you so much, Cody, for sharing your story, sharing your products with us. It's been enlightening for me. There's a lot I didn't know about your brand that I learned today. For everybody who is on here, we are going to be sending out the recording of this sometime tomorrow, probably around 12, with a summary and also a link to Cody's website, Untitled Co. Design. Is that what it is? Yeah. And his nomination and the Etsy award. So go take a look at that. And like I said, we are going to be doing another webinar in about a month with Kai Van, again on the call. Kai has had a lot of experience with Kickstarter campaigns and commercialization, so we're going to be talking to him about that on Thursday, July 21st. So be on the lookout for an email. And thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.